Why isn't America ready for a woman president yet? Elizabeth Warren didn't get fair treatment in her 2020 campaign, and she knows it. But she also doesn't want to fall into the gender trap and say it quite yet. So I'll say it for her. Sexism played a huge role in the arc and fall of the Warren campaign. And American women are tired of it. We are tired. We're angry. We're sad. Even if Warren wasn't your favorite candidate, women can relate to the deeply frustrating situation of being told, hey, you're smart, you're qualified, talented, you have a lot of good ideas or plans, but we just don't think you're quite right for this position. There was a point where we thought you were the best person for the job, but that just turned out to be a momentary blip. That job, in the case of Warren, is being President of the United States. She would have been the first woman president in America's 243-year history. At least 59 other countries have already beat us to this milestone. We are now living in a time when there's more diversity in leadership than ever before. We elected the first Black president 12 years ago. 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton put 65 million cracks in the glass ceiling. But even that wasn't enough for Warren, or any other woman, to break through. What makes this year particularly heartbreaking, or galling, choose your adjective, is that this time, it's the Democratic electorate who let women down.
One of the hardest parts of this is all those big promises and all those little girls who are going to have to wait 4 more years. That's going to be hard.
I had a conversation with a liberal journalist, who's a man, in 2016 about the likelihood of when America would elect a woman president. He said America needs someone that they think is, quote, more pure, and with all the baggage that Clinton came with, and the high regard that many progressives held Warren in, whether that's fair or not, she would have a better shot. Apparently, she wasn't pure enough. Will any woman ever be? This election cycle, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, and Kirsten Gillibrand, all fellow sitting senators, weren't good enough either. For women, the most troubling refrain that we face in schools, at work, with our families, or wherever in society is, you're not good enough. We have to work extra hard to lift each other up and convince ourselves that we are. That takes a lot of energy and effort. So if the women in your life seem a little sadder or a little angrier, today or tomorrow or the day after, give them a little grace and time and space. Countless people said in 2016 that they're totally comfortable voting for a woman, just not that woman, Hillary Clinton. 4 years later, turns out that's total bullsh, which we already knew. But because of Trump's unexpected triumph in 2016 via the Electoral College, Democrats took the wrong lessons from that election. That a woman can't beat Donald Trump, or that America isn't ready to elect a woman president. Guess what? Hillary Clinton already beat him, and Elizabeth Warren would be electable if you f***ing voted for her. Democrats became so spooked and panicked by Trump's victory that they've been desperately searching for some indefinable quality of electability, that magic factor that will allow this person to beat Donald Trump in November. Survey after survey shows that that is Democratic voters' #1 priority, defeating this incumbent president, his corruption, and his policies. But the concept of electability is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The men in the race don't get asked that question as much, if at all, despite their various flaws. It's a simplified answer of looking at 2016 and wondering why Trump was able to eke out this victory. There probably were some sexist voters among those 80,000 people in the Midwest that tipped him the election. But remember that 3 million more people across America voted for Hillary Clinton. So why should we spend our time and energy bowing to the sexists instead of trying to help better inform or persuade them? Unfortunately, electability dogged Elizabeth Warren until the very end. We interviewed several voters in the early primary and Super Tuesday states who told us that Warren was their preferred candidate. They liked her policies best, but they worried that enough Americans wouldn't vote for her because she's a woman. We're not the only ones. Voters have told this to countless other news outlets. In a Daily Beast report from a Warren rally the night before Super Tuesday, one woman said she was, quote, really saddened because her husband told her she's wasting her vote on Warren. Another young woman said her friends told her she's, quote, stealing votes from Sanders by voting for Warren. With these kinds of assumptions and pressures, is it any wonder that Warren didn't do better? Then there's the total lack of media coverage over the past month of her campaign. She received some favorable coverage when she was polling high in the fall, but come January and February, when most voters who aren't political news junkies actually start paying attention, cable news was spending significantly more time talking about Michael Bloomberg than Elizabeth Warren. She was left out of key polls and often not even mentioned as a candidate who was still in the race. Here's your reminder that Michael Bloomberg decided to skip the first 4 voting states. He wasn't even on the ballot, and he still got more coverage than Warren. The writer Rebecca Traister, who is an expert on women's history and politics, has written extensively about the media gatekeepers who frame and shape our narratives about politics. It's a field that's still dominated by mostly older white men. In a piece that she wrote last year, when Chris Matthews still had his own show on MSNBC, she wrote about him and other male pundits who have, quote, high-paid media jobs, despite lengthy records of mediocre analysis, grotesque speech about women, and relative cluelessness about race. The problem, she wrote, is that their jobs are crucial to how the story of the presidential race will be told to the millions of people who watch them. And that's exactly it. The default lens through which much of our news and media is filtered is a very male point of view. That determines what issues are elevated, which candidates get the most coverage, who is assumed to be a viable candidate, all based on conscious and unconscious biases. And that determines who many Americans think is electable. So if on Monday you're told it's a 2-person race between Biden and Sanders, why wouldn't you vote for just one of them when you walk into the voting booth on Tuesday? By the way, Chris Matthews, who has a long, well-documented history of sexist comments and workplace harassment, was forced out of his job this week, partially because of Elizabeth Warren. That's how effective she is at taking down sexists in power, but people didn't want to give her that chance to do it against Donald Trump this November. She wasn't a perfect candidate. No one is. Among other things, the issue of her claims about Native American heritage are a legitimate issue and an affront to many people in an extremely oppressed minority. They need to be addressed. But in terms of policy acumen, a willingness to listen to those critics, and a record of accomplishments to point to, she was pretty damn close to perfect to many. Because she's a woman, her flaws are treated as that much more problematic. And there is no way for her to please everyone. When she went after Bloomberg, people cheered. But other people thought she was too mean, too angry, too strident. She responded, yes, given the state of the country, I am angry, and I own it. But then people say she's too much like a scolding teacher or professor. And if she dances or lets loose, she's considered awkward or inauthentic. Women everywhere know the double standards that we face when it comes to our appearances, our work, our bodies, and our worth. All of that is amplified on the national stage when you're seeking the highest office in the land. There's a reason why women members of Congress who are Bernie surrogates are tweeting that they're having a tough time with this too. Maybe one day America will get there. I'd like to think it'll be in our lifetimes, but my heart breaks for anyone who won't get to see it. Women who fought for the right to vote 100 years ago. Warren, for her part, invoked a famous mantra that started because she dared to stand up to Mitch McConnell in the Senate 3 years ago, when she broke the news to her campaign staff that she's suspending her campaign. She said, "If you leave with only one thing, it must be this. Choose to fight only righteous fights, because then when things get tough, and they will, you will know that there is only one option ahead of you. Nevertheless, you must persist. It's going to be hard, but we persist."